Police in this country kill 1,000 people a year, and 99% of those people face no charges. And even within the context of that 1%, the majority face no jail time. This is an unaccountable aspect of our society of quote-unquote criminal justice. This is typical norm, an odd thing. This appalling perspective, this appalling number is somewhat normal, except for this year. Because when they killed George Floyd, it just so happened to set a resonance across the country where all of the tension in this country that was built up from all of these years, even from the standpoint of the virus, from the standpoint of wages, from the standpoint of lost jobs, and yeah, from the standpoint of seeing another black person killed in the street unnecessarily, the potential energy erupted. You had protests, not just all across the United States, but all across the world. And within the US, you had protests all 50 states. The tenor of the public itself changed to one where a Black Lives Matter thing is not non-mainstream anymore. Or the perspective of the public looking at cops, find them less trustworthy. Even from the standpoint of the talk that African Americans have had for decades about the way the cops behave, the public finally moved to the point of agreement, or at the very least belief. So things have some degree changed. Whether those changes are final and instantiated going forward, who knows? But at the very least, the perspective of those things have to some degree shifted. If you're a cop, I would imagine you have to basically reconcile two things. The philosophical aspect of your responsibilities as a cop and the practical aspects of what you do as a cop. Meaning, what is your job? What is your role? What are you supposed to be? Who are you in juxtaposition against the society itself? You have to deal with those questions. And whether you answer those questions or ask yourself explicitly or implicitly through your actions, an answer forms. You can either be proactive about it or not. I'm asking something very, very basic. What is your job as a cop? And is your job as a cop to preserve life? Is it to preserve limb? Is it to preserve property? And for that matter, is it to be a steward of the society with pushing this notion of justice, as subjective and impossible of a thing that is, over just this notion of imprisonment? We have 25% of the world in our jails. That number, again, is appalling. We have private corporations that will pay politicians to put laws on the books that make it that much more likely for somebody to end up in jail in order to help their profit motive. Utterly and entirely disgusting. But again, we go back to this notion of what is your job as a cop? Yes, there's a societal aspect to this because in a real sense, they send cops to do the job that the cops can't do. The cop can't do anything to fix up a society. The cop can't do anything from stopping a community from being alienated. A cop can't do anything about some of the laws that are in place that basically, let's say, push them to act a particular way or to criminalize a particular group. I'm saying that there is a culture from the standpoint of the way cops talk and relate to one another, and trying to get one cop to police another cop seems to be almost impossible. Will it happen on probability? Yeah, of course. Is it the norm? No. It's a blue line, as they call it, for a reason. I'm going to show you the video that's been released from Tutao. Now, Tutao, and from his perspective, that's in the video, is his perspective of George Floyd being murdered. He's arguing that, look, it's not my fault. I didn't, there was nothing I did wrong here. And showing the video footage is his way of trying to get across, see, I didn't do anything wrong in this process. I would argue this video is more damning just by virtue of what cops, again, what is your job? What are you supposed to stand for? What is your mission statement? And just based on this video in and of itself, various aspects of the mission statement were completely ignored. And I would make the point that it's ignored all across the United States. He's not a bad apple. He's part of a particular police culture and was trained and operates in that way, just like people in other cultures operate in the way they operate. It's just so happened these are cops. I'm going to show you this video, parts of it. And I'm going to show you something that he said that is mind-blowing, and it is more damning than I think he realizes. I understand that he released this video trying to say I wasn't involved. But here's the thing. If you, me, and 5 other people rob a store, I'm the getaway driver, meaning I have nothing to do with this process. I'm nowhere near this process. If anything goes down, if anything goes wrong, if any of those people get caught, I'm going to jail too. It doesn't matter that I didn't open the door. It doesn't matter that I have the gun. None of that stuff matters. You were there. You were in that moment, and you had a certain job, philosophically, in fact, and morally, to do something. And fact of the matter is, the culture that you're operating in doesn't even have the doing something as a real option. Let's see Tu Tao. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and of course subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. So let's just get to the video. And I'm going to make the point of why I think it's more damning and it does not clear him. Now, whether that's specifically legal or not, that's going to be something that's going to be argued in the courts. But I would say this is more of an indictment, not less. Let's see Tu Tao's video. This is a news agency that's kind of talking about it.
Especially for me, my heart kind of sank.
This morning, newly released video shows what former Minneapolis police officer Tu Tao thought when he learned George Floyd died, and what Tao says he could have done differently.
I guess it would be, more observant towards Floyd.
This footage, part of Tao's 1 hour and 40-minute interview with investigators. Tao explains how Officer Derek Chauvin got control over George Floyd.
I believe it's a lefty.
Have you seen that or used a maneuver similar to that?
No.
The interview's release comes a day after Tao's body camera was filed in court. Video his lawyers believe helps prove he shouldn't face criminal charges, including aiding and abetting second-degree killing of George Floyd. Tao trying to control the growing crowd as other officers restrained Floyd until he lost consciousness and later died. At one point, Tao confronts this woman in the black sweatshirt. She identified herself as an off-duty firefighter.
They're killing him.
They just murdered him. The audience stood there. Now the catch becomes, in real terms, real life, real world reality, 4 men are murdering another man. Everything else you want to say about it, you can put cops, you can put people. The real world truth, the real nub of the reality is 4 men murdered another man. 1 put his knee on his throat, and the other 3 basically put his knee on other parts of his body also. None of this was within any context of ensuring he was going to get medical attention. None of this was in the context of ensuring that he was already subdued so you can take. None of that stuff was done. Overt pressure on a man's throat for 9 minutes. Now, you can add a layer to that and say, okay, but they were cops. But at the end of the day, though, they're just human beings. The context of it does matter. I mean, we've wrapped them in certain authorities that are under the law and everything else. But the reality of it is a crowd of people watch 4 men murder another man. And she's trying to say, look, you need to pay attention to him. Now, his argument is, yeah, I guess I could have paid more attention to Floyd. The problem is, as he puts it here, when asked, he makes the point, it is not my job to check on Floyd.
Yeah, they're saying, yeah, get off him, get off his neck, look at him.
Suggesting what?
Check on him. Yeah.
Check on him? Did you do that?
That was not my job.
In court.
That wasn't my job. Wasn't my job. I immediately went to Minneapolis police's page on mission and values. Let's take a look for a moment. Because, again, this question of what is your job matters, infinitely so. We recognize that public safety is not just the absence of crime, it's the presence of justice. Great. We are truthful and ethical in all we do, say, and write. We hold each other accountable. X that one out. We build and rely upon trust of our communities. Yeah, X that one out too. We do not engage in conduct, public or private, that will sully or shame the department. But that's just it. There's laws on the books pretty much in every country in the every state in the United States that one officer can engage another officer to prevent that officer from going too far. Meaning, if we're at a traffic stop, one officer takes out a gun and says he's going to blow my brains out. The other cop has a responsibility to ensuring that I get out that alive and that his partner, who's acting over the top, gets subjugated in some way. In real world terms, though, that's not exactly how that works. These guys are all basically working together, see themselves in the brotherhood, has a certain identity associated with being within that system. And when that system is under stress and under pressure, the people within that system get closer together, I imagine, just like any other system. In this very specific case, people, that community who they say you're supposed to trust, you just murdered somebody in the middle of that community, not just in the middle of the community, around the world could watch. It's appalling. The idea that you as a cop, I just read the mission statement, that it was not your responsibility to ensure that the person who you were taking in was alive is problematic to me. If your officer was indeed doing something that you say you've never seen before, which I don't believe. The reason that Tao didn't respond to this is because this is normal policing. Everywhere across the country, every cop probably said, wow, there but go the grace of God, go I, because that looks like normal policing, which is why the other cops didn't respond or didn't act in any particular way as if anything was going on that was weird. They casually murdered him because this is the way they carry out their jobs across the United States. It's not a bad apple. The entire thing is rotten. And in this case, you just got to see a sliver of it. It is his responsibility, all of theirs, every last one of theirs, to ensure that Floyd get out alive. If your job as a cop is to protect the community, that community also includes people who are not necessarily having their best day in the way that they are behaving. And as you engage them, there should be some responsibility for you as a cop to ensure that this person gets out alive and you do everything in your power to ensure such. Why do I say it that way? It's because it's your job. If your job is law and order and protecting the population and those type of things, well, that guy who you're subjugating is also part of the community, part of the population. And if you're going to argue to me that it is not your responsibility to ensure that your partner doesn't murder that guy, then yeah, I think you're complicit. If you're basically, yeah, we're standing on him. I saw the guy do this maneuver that apparently I've never seen before. And despite him doing something that I've never seen before, I just stood there, casually talked with him, and just stood there and waited for the 9 minutes until he died. But I didn't have anything to do with that. Well, wait, you're a cop, right? Don't you have a responsibility for that man's life? It wasn't my job. Look, your job should be subordinate to humanity. The thing that's real is you. The job is not. I understand you may get money from it. I understand you may have an identity associated with it. All of that stuff is true. And we accrue those things around us as we kind of maneuver our way through a particular organization with cops, teachers, whatever. But in this very specific case, his job as a cop, in some part, is to protect life and limb, even if that means protecting it from your own. And in many of these situations where people are shot in the back, shot not holding a weapon, where the cop is planting evidence, well, many of these cases, the partners go along with it. That's why you can't tell me that they're good cops, because they stand by and let these horrible cops do these horrible things. And I think this is more prevalent than a lot of people would like to admit. He's guilty of sin. Based on the own mission statement, you're guilty of sin. Your partner sat there and murdered somebody. You say you've never seen him do a hold like that before, meaning your partner did something that was atypical. And because it was atypical, it looks like you would have more scrutiny on the actions, especially as it pertains to the person who's laying on the ground, especially when that person stops moving. They kept his knee on his throat another, 3 minutes after he stopped moving? And so, yeah, Tao, you need to go to prison, dog. I'm not a big fan of sending people to cages, but you murdered a man. Or worked with a guy to murder a man, second-degree murder. At no point did you live up to your responsibility to stop that officer, probably never crossed your mind. At no point did you even care enough to check the pulse to make sure he was alive. Again, probably never crossed your mind. And in your head, I'm just doing my job. And my job just means I need to subdue and just work with the other officers in regards to what we're doing here. Why are you charges on me? There but for the grace of God go I. Because that could have been any officer in the United States. So Tao may feel like he's not culpable in this, but you were there, you were helping, you had a philosophical and a job responsibility to ensure the dude was alive, or at the very least did your best to ensure that he was alive. You failed on all those counts. So yeah, Chauvin might have been the one that put the knee on the throat, but you were there helping as he did that. I don't understand how you're not culpable and responsible for this crime. So we'll see what, the lawsuit and how it goes. But at the end of the day, that clip and his response is horrifying. If you were walking on a bridge and you see somebody in the lake drowning, let's say it's a kid or something, do you jump in and help? Now, the catch becomes, man, if I jump in, it's going to be a pain in the ass. I'm going to have to find a way to get back up. The water's probably going to be cold. There's going to be a current. I don't really have an energy to do this. But do you do it anyway? Because life matters more than those things. Meaning, you jump in because it's a life. And you recognize the value of that life. And you try to get that kid out despite all of the hardships that you have to endure and go through in order to save that life. Or do you just walk by? Which one is more ethical? Now, either response, believe it or not, is fair game. You can have society and a culture that think either one of those things are perfectly apt and perfectly okay. Keep in mind, we used to have slaves, and Rome used to whip their kill their people in a ring. But from our point of view, what's the correct action? Well, again, it depends on what you think about life. Does life matter more? In the case of being a cop, and you have this philosophical responsibility of trying to preserve life. Yes, order, but trying to preserve life. And even some degree of philosophical responsibility of doing that as a human being with your own likes, dislikes, difficulties, problems, pushback on you taking a certain action. I get it. I'm making the point that in the same way there's a cost in jumping into the water and saving that kid, there's a cost. And a cop stopping and saying, wait, we need you to check on this guy because I think you're going to kill him. That would have been to the benefit of Chauvin. That would have been a benefit of Floyd. And it would have been a benefit of the other guy who is also being prosecuted right now. They would have been pissed at you, yes. They may have called you bad names, yes. But again, that's the cost. It's the fact that life, on some level, should matter more. And I understand that's an ideological position. Fuck it, I'll hold it. I mean, the most precious... You have a person that basically has the ability to conceive of the world to which they exist in. They can conceive of the cosmos. They can conceive of all those things. They can even come up with imaginary things like governments and jobs and positions, etc., etc., etc. The problem is people often get so wrapped up in the position or the job that they miss that that job is a undermining or under a larger superstructure of actual reality. Do your job, whatever that job is. But oftentimes the job is untethered to the rest or what's in the best interest of the society. Sometimes you get something good. Sometimes you get something ridiculous. Sometimes you get something that's utterly horrible, like AI technology that scans people and for that matter creating this kind of dystopian state. There's always a cost in how you operate, how you when you do things. Just because you do something good doesn't necessarily good follow. But again, this is somewhat of an ideological statement of what matters more. To Tao, Floyd's life didn't matter more. So he was going to do his job. The job was the thing that wasn't entirely real. The thing that was real was Floyd and him and Chauvin basically killing him. I'm saying superseding and going beyond this notion of what it means to work in a particular way and going to the notion of what it means to just be a person and understand that the person part, the human part, matters infinitely more than the undermining substructure of the job. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there's no consequence. I'm just saying what's more right. Is it more right to save the kid? Is it more right to go beyond and understand that this is a job? The guy's alive. I need to save the guy's life. The job isn't real. Look, I think that's rare that people do that. I think oftentimes people do have to function from the standpoint as if the undermining or underlying system that we have conceptually is indeed somewhat real. And we focus on it because it allows us to live. Living being the real part of it, but the same token, the imagination of the jobs and the other organizations that we attend to in order to kind of get this kind of substance, this kind of stupid human trick. Those things aren't, but those things are absolutely entirely required in the way that we operate in order for us to even get to the point of actual living. Look, I'll end it here. I'm just saying, the idea that as a cop, it is in no way your responsibility to ensure that that person comes out alive if there's any chance that that person can come out alive. And you think it is not my responsibility to do that. I'm sorry, that is a mind-blowing statement. And in and of itself, that should be indicting, especially when you look at the responsibility of cops. And cops are supposed to police other cops. Why? Because at the end of the day, the person who you're arresting is indeed a person that is part of your particular community. And if there's any value to life at all, you have to be able to supersede the job. Meaning, your job as a cop, if somebody is acting horribly towards a person, it's your responsibility to intervene into that. And it's your responsibility because that person is a person also in our community. And that person's life has value, and we accept that value. And so if you're doing the job itself and you go about bringing somebody in, that's one thing. You are no longer doing the job if you are using murderous force or this kind of maximum justice that these guys impart. That is no longer doing your job. That's something else. In which case, that cop has every responsibility in the world to hold you accountable as you go about doing it. The thing with Chauvin, though, is that it's normal policing. So none of them even had the wits about them to think that anything was going wrong in the situation. So I hope you understand what I mean. The normality of that video is the disturbing aspect of that video. Yes, it takes 9 minutes, but it's something that happens all across the United States every day, and nobody watches. Nobody has this footage, even though you can find other footage, but that footage hasn't necessarily taken off in the way this has. Tutel, I'm not a big fan of putting people in prison, but you need to go to prison. And many of these cops, just starting off, need to be prosecuted when things like this happen with a vigorous justice system to ensure that there's some level of accountability to the job that they involve themselves in. Not to mention the immunity that they get from the standpoint of the law. No, that needs to change. Not just that, even how we do our communities in the sense of investing in communities to prevent those alienated communities, to prevent the need for cops in the first place, where you undermine the very notion and the need for that organization where it can dwindle away. And ensure that those communities aren't left behind and alienated. I want to get rid of the need for cops. And in doing so, of getting rid of the need for cops, or at the very least lessening the need for cops, I can thereby lessen the money that is appropriated to them. Now, whether that's true or not in practice, who knows? You're probably going to get people who are law and order types. But my basic argument, especially now with the way that the public is thinking about this stuff, is that you have two ways of dealing with issues of your society that are problems of alienation. You can invest in prisons and throw those people in jails and end up in a situation where you have 25% of the world's prison or people in prison in your jails. That's appalling. I mean, that's utterly embarrassing. Or you can invest in your communities and ensure that the social engagement and that people are growing up have the means, the cash, the things that they need to get from point A to point B and live their life. You cut down on the stress of their life. You ensure that they can go to school to the degree that they want to go to school, or for that matter, won't go hungry, or for that matter, even the lowest common denominator has a place to stay and is warm in the winter. If you have a society like that, then the issue of crime and everything else goes down. Crime is a rational act of somebody who's in a particular community where they can get advantage in that community. That's not everybody, but poverty incentivizes that type of behavior. Eliminate the poverty, you would eliminate a lot of the other issues that kind of escalate from that very basic point. All right, I'm going to end this because I mean this video went way too long. I'm going to say like, share, and of course subscribe. And I will be back in a few moments. I have a few videos to get in.